Thank you. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you for this invitation. It is an honor to be here among so many people who are dedicated to service learning. I teased my predecessor Bob Hebert at McNeese by telling him that I plan to take credit for everything he started, and there's a germ of truth to that, especially at a conference like that. Here I am. I started July 1. And I look out and hear all of you who have been engaged in student service learning long before I got here. I can tell you that at McNeese, our mission is four-pronged: academic excellence, student success, community partnerships, and financial stewardship. And for any president, I think if you were to talk about a new program or what kind of programs you would want, you'd want them, at least if you're a strategic manager, and I believe in strategic management, you'd want a program that hits all those buttons, hits the buttons of your mission, stays right there in the target of your mission. And I can tell you that from what I've heard this morning, this kind of community involvement hits the buttons at McNeese. It talks about student success, academic excellence, community partnerships, financial stewardship. Our motto at McNeese is excellence with a personal touch. That is community service, that's one-on-one, that's serving individuals. I thought I'd mention a couple of models that I have seen that were exciting to me and were an example of what Nadine Cruz talked about this morning in her excellent presentation that talked about the multifaceted way that service learning gets at the academic enterprise. One at University of Montevallo in Alabama was a partnership of a faculty member in the Department of Education and a faculty member in the Department of Art. And it involved going to the elementary school and asking students to submit crayon drawings of what they would like to be when they grew up. And so students took crayon to paper and drew cheerleaders and basketball. I think one had something that looked suspiciously like a university president. There were various pictures, and these were submitted to the University of Montevallo Art Department. They then took them and chose which ones they would like to create into life-size metal sculptures, full color. And of course, you can imagine the number of decisions that went on. Which do we choose? How do we take crayon and paper and turn it into bonded paint and metal? But they did it. And when they finished, they took these life-size statues and put them in the garden of the elementary school. So now the students could see, look what I did. Parents could see, look what our children did. The school could show it off to visitors. We found that townspeople, Chamber of Commerce, civic leaders, when they brought people to the town, would bring them by the elementary school to show them the partnership that had developed between the university and the elementary school. But it didn't stop there. We were developing a partnership with a sister city relationship with a town in Japan. And someone, and it was not me, had the idea, let's do the same thing. Let's do it for the children in Japan. So the children in the little town of Echizen, Japan, submitted crayon drawings of what they wanted to be when they grew up. It came back to the art department at University of Montevallo. Sculptures were made in metal and were sent back to the town. The town was so pleased, those sculptures ended up in the town park, a sculpture garden, where they could talk about this wonderful relationship with this American town. I mentioned that illustration to talk about how, and this all happened as a partnership of people who just, I don't think anybody could have planned it. I certainly could never have envisioned that. But the fact that folks were willing to say yes at all the right moments and were willing for that to happen, it didn't really cost a lot of money. The students were going to do art projects anyway. The sculpture class was going to create metal sculptures anyway. But it did take someone deciding to turn what could have been just a normal art project into a service learning project. Shifting focus to the present, I've learned about, I had the privilege of going to Michael Buckle's presentation this morning, and learning about the community orchestra, the orchestra going to the middle school. What we saw a bit of it on the film, but the idea of students in a school where over 87% of the students get free lunches are learning to play the violin because of lessons being offered through a service learning program from students at McNeese. I know when I would go to see an orchestra at say, Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., or Carnegie Hall in New York, the thought never crossed my mind that those orchestra folks were anything other than upper-class students who had gone to elite private schools. But the idea that these students could be from middle schools where free lunches were the norm rather than the exception, and they could in fact learn to play the violin like anybody else, and the fact that students in college could be mentoring them and learning from a teacher mentorship skills, and to see that playing out, I think it does something to the fabric of our communities that doesn't happen in higher education any other way. So I agree with my colleagues here that service learning is something that we need to be supporting at the presidential level, and something that's certainly here to stay. Thanks to all of you.
I'd like to ask one more question before turning things over to Steve and asking the audience if they have questions of our panel. Undoubtedly, there's a culture of service learning on our campuses, and Dr. Hulbert, you're right. Long before we had this grant, our colleges of nursing, our schools of education, our student affairs departments were all engaged in service learning, but we didn't call it service learning. Where would you like, if we had this panel assembled 5 years from now, what would you like to say about how service learning might have evolved on your campus? Where would you like to see service learning going on your campus?
Personally, I would hope at that point in time it is simply going to be part of an assumed role of a member of the teaching faculty or of an administrator in student affairs or student life that wants to contribute to the development of the community and to students. I think that clearly in my mind, I see it as part of a teaching role. And we're trying to change the definition. You know, as we've grown these universities across this country, in some ways, as they've moved towards research institutions, we've taken faculty away from the classroom, away from a relationship with students. At the same time that in our population, people are spending less and less time, their lives are so busy, they're spending less and less time giving back to their church or to their civic organization or to other groups like that. And I think that we need to re-educate ourselves that it's an expected role of teaching faculty, along with research, and again from a regional university like my own, research that helps the development of the region the institution serves. And I would hope that would be what would be a common understanding. Clearly, there aren't going to be the resources to fund specialized programs for many of us to maintain service learning departments. We're going to have to go back to the original model, and it will come out of the creativity of faculty and the mutual expectations among faculty that this is part of our job.
Thank you. Dr. Webb, Dr. Williams?
Okay. Probably 10 or 12 years ago at Northwestern, as part of our strategic visioning process at that time, faculty and the staff came together and made a determination that Northwestern should become a student learning centered university. And so we adopted that model. It's not something we pressed upon people, said they must do, anything of that nature, but it really is part and parcel of what our online education system is all about at Northwestern. That is, the courses, the degree programs that we offer online follow this kind of a model. It's a learning outcome-based model for teaching. So my hope is that we will continue to move in that direction. My hope is that, I keep talking about 10 years from now, but I'll say 5 for Brad's purposes. But my hope is that within 5 years, we will have moved significantly toward it being a learning-centered university where the faculty have primary responsibility for facilitating student learning and for mentoring students. Well, as you can see, service learning fits right into that mode. But if I were to talk about it in terms of some kind of quantifiable thinking, then I would say if we have a certain number of courses right now in which we engage in service learning as part of the educational process, then I would hope that would be multiplied by 5 or 10 or 20 within 5 years. If now we have a single course in the College of Education for elementary school teachers in which the students participate in tutoring in at-risk schools in the community or the region, then I would hope that 5 years from now there would be more and more students and faculty participating, but that there might also be, as we've heard today, possibly classes in music or math or science or other disciplines, writing, where our people get out into the schools, our students get out into the schools as role models and help students in those schools have a vision for what they can be in life. And it's just a matter of people catching on to that vision. I don't know if that's what Mac McCarter was saying this morning, but that's what I derive from his thinking, that if you can take kids, if you can take parents, if you can take people who care and who really would like to build a better society, then those people, given proper attention, given a vision, are allowed to develop their own vision, then they really truly can have a chance at changing not just themselves, but changing society at large. I'll give you one other final example. What our student athletes do at the university comes under the rubric of community service. I'm pleased to say for 2 consecutive years, we had Lady Demon star athletes who won the Southland Conference Award for this. One was a star softball player 1 year, and then the other was a star basketball player for the 2nd year. And I was so excited going around telling people that it's hard to believe that we've got these students engaging in an average of 2,000 hours a year, student athletes, just student athletes, in these kinds of experiences. Well, I had to be corrected lately because within another year, it grew to 5,000 hours of community service on the part of our student athletes. So one would hope that we have the opportunity to spread the good news of service learning far and wide throughout each of our institutions, and probably just as importantly, if not more so, throughout our communities.